Okay. This morning, we'll be taking a look at the church liturgical calendar. Every once in a while, people ask us ask questions about why do the colors change on the appointments in the church, and what is the meaning of some of that. And so we thought we would spend some time looking at that. And so we asked one of our own, Reverend Mike McCallum, to come and share with us some things about the liturgical year to help us understand a little better about how the seasons ebb and flow in our worship. Mike?
Okay, thank you. Everybody got the handout. The handout goes through an awful lot of this stuff. And I'm not going to go through it line by line with you and show you, tell you what is going on. But the liturgical calendar is something that's been, the church calendar has been around for centuries. And it basically follows the life and teachings of Christ. And, goes from his birth to his death and beyond. We start with Lent. The church calendar always starts with Advent, starts with the birth of Christ. Starts at Advent, then goes through Christmas, goes through Epiphany, goes to Lent, Easter, and then past Easter, it goes to Pentecost, and then past Pentecost, it goes just to ordinary time till we come back around again till Advent. And it talks about what all the different seasons mean. And this piece that I have here that I'm going to give you, this piece comes from the Directory of Worship, the church's Directory for Worship. It says, as God created and appointed days, God created a rhythm of time and appointed seasons for worship. In the Old Testament, people observed seasons of fasting and feasting as occasions for festival worship of God. And Jesus kept these particular festivals. And for the church in the New Testament, the festivals were transformed in meaning and purpose by Jesus' life and his teaching, his death, resurrection, and by the gift of the Holy Spirit. Jesus' birth, his life, his death, his resurrection, ascension, and promised return give meaning to the seasons, which order the annual rhythm of worship and guide the selection of lessons to be read and proclaimed in the life of the church. And through 2 millennia of Christian worship, a certain cycle of festivals and seasons has emerged and is now recognized and observed throughout the ecumenical church. And some of these events can be traced to the early centuries of the Christian practice. Others developed later in the history of the church. A Directory for Worship provides a helpful outline for these festivals and seasons, and that's part of what you have there in your hands. Like I say, the season starts with Advent, which is usually the first 4 Sundays or so before Christmas. And that's where we start. And Advent is talking about the coming of Christ, and we look forward to the Lord's coming again. And that's part of the Advent process. We usually in church history we light an Advent candle. The 4 Sundays have different themes: peace, hope, love, joy, and we light the Christ candle on Christmas to kind of give us a cycle there of where we go. And so we start with Advent. Advent, the color for Advent, the traditional color for Advent is purple. And we normally see that purple is a royal color. And so we're talking about the coming of Christ, Christ the King, royal color, purple. In recent years, the liturgical color has turned to blue. Blue is more of talking more of hope. I think that's on your handout there, that it talks about that toward the ending of purple. It's a royal coming, the coming of Christ. It's traditional color. However, blue is increasingly used since it expresses hope, and that's the dominant theme of the season. And I kind of like the blue. I don't know. I like the purple, but I kind of like the blue better. I mean, I don't know. It just goes more with the season for me. I have when I first was ordained, I had stoles that marked the different seasons and colors, and I have a purple one. But then I ended up making a blue one, so I wear a blue one every once in a while. When I was in worship here couple of weeks ago. I couldn't find my blue full. I couldn't find my blue stole. I don't know where it's at in the move between our apartment and our new condo. Someplace it's there somewhere, but I can't find it. So, but I did find my robes, which was kind of nice, but I couldn't find the stoles. So there's Advent. I don't know. Do you have some questions about what Advent or colors or anything, things like that? I mean, we have our own Advent practice, which is the lighting of the Advent candles. They used to be purple and pink and all kinds of good colors.
It seems like, wasn't purple what the ecclesiastical priests,
Yeah.
the Jewish priests back when Jesus would?
Yeah, that was the color. That was one of the colors of the robes they could wear was purple. Purple is a royal color, and so that was why we use purple for Advent, because we're talking about the coming of the King, and so we use purple. And like I say, now we're going to blue, which is more of a hope color. That's what we're looking for, hoping for the coming of Christ, and so we go to blue a little bit. Blue hasn't been as widely accepted quite yet, but it's coming. Yeah.
Is it part of the liturgical year, the use of the lectionary?
It can be, yeah. The lectionary follows the liturgical year. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, she was asking about doesn't the liturgical year follow the lectionary? Well, the lectionary actually follows the liturgical year, and the lectionary gives appoints different scriptures for different times of the year, and there's three different cycles of the lectionary, A, B, and they call them A, B, and C. Really original, but they're A, B, and C cycles, so that we change up scripture every 3 years, and the scriptures are supposed to help us follow the life of the church in the lectionary, in the liturgical year, but it also helps us be able to read through the Bible in a year. I mean, certain selections. There's some that are, there's an Old Testament reading, a New Testament reading, an epistle, and a psalm. Those are 4 readings that are appointed for each. Actually, if you want to really be. There's a lectionary cycle that's appointed for each and every day of the year, and you can read through the Bible. You read through the Bible in a year. It was always kind of fun because some of those, as pastors, I'm kind of a lectionary preacher, and so I follow the lectionary when I'm going out on pulpit supply someplace. I'll follow the lectionary and pull one of those 4 scriptures out to preach on. Sometimes it's kind of fun because when you read it, I don't want to do that one because that one's too hard. Sometimes there are hard passages of scripture, and you just look at those and you think, no. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
I'm sorry, I'm off on the lectionary, but it's sort of fun because which denominations or what do all Protestant denominations make use of or maybe all denominations make use of the lectionary?
Well,
it's sort of fun because at Advent, I have a friend who encouraged whoever was interested to write a haiku based on the scripture for that day. And then she sends it to everyone that's interested, and it's really fun. It's a prayerful experience. Takes moments, but it's interesting to see how different people pull different meaning from each day's scripture suggestions.
Yeah. No, the lectionary. There's a couple of different ones. The Catholic Church follows a little different lectionary than Protestant churches, but most Protestant churches all follow the same lectionary. the Presbyterian Church puts out a lectionary reading. You know, they put out lectionary readings. It's in their, it's in the I don't know if you ever see the Presbyterian Church calendar that they publish. It's got lectionary readings on it for every day, and it's kind of cool to follow along what they are. But like I say, there's three different A, B, and cycle A, B, and C, and so they right now I don't even remember which one we're in. When I go to look for the daily lectionary, I just type it into the computer, into the search engine, and say, "Give me the lectionary readings for this day." You know, they pop up. So I thought, okay, I don't even know what cycle we're in.
So, Mike, years ago when I was growing up, and probably the first 20 or 30 years into my adulthood, we never did the lighting of the Advent candle. And all of a sudden, everybody was doing that. Is that something that's more recent, or did they always do it?
No, it's always been there. It's always been there.
Must have just been the churches.
Yeah,
that
it's just the
did
church. Yeah, some particular churches don't follow the lighting of the Advent candle. I mean, when I was growing up, it was always there. I'm a lifelong member of the Presbyterian Church, and it's always been there for me. Now, Shirley, on the other hand, comes from a background of Assembly of God background. They never lit an Advent candle. Had no clue what an Advent candle was. I think it's funny because one of Shirley's sister-in-laws sent to their parents as a Christmas gift an Advent wreath. It's a very pretty wreath. We have it. But she sent that to them, and they're looking at it, what is this?
Well, I'm a lifelong Presbyterian, so I must have just been in the wrong congregation.
Could very well be. Some people don't. Some people don't observe. Don't use that as part of their Advent experience. I don't know. I guess I've never been in a church that hasn't, but I know some do. Some don't. Like I say, Shirley had to explain it to her parents what this Advent wreath was all about. I thought it was kind of funny. But Advent is the first cycle in the liturgical calendar, and it's a cool time. And it colors purple. We change the colors for purple. And then we go from Advent to Christmas is the next one up. And Christmas, the color for Christmas is white, and so they put white paraments out usually wear white stoles. Some people do, some people don't. You probably notice when Pat and Nathan are up in front, when they wear a stole, it's some other colorful type stole. That's kind of cool. I don't know. I've never had one other than the regular liturgical colors. I've never felt the need to purchase one different than that, or have one given to me. Other than that, then I made the blue one for myself. So that Christmas is, that's one of the things that are in bold at the bottom of the first page. Christmas isn't but a single day, but it's a season. Christmas is a season. It starts on Christmas Day, the 25th, and then goes for several days, usually 12 days. 12 days of Christmas up till Epiphany. And when they hit Epiphany, then we come to the season of Epiphany. And we don't change the color. Their color stays white. And we don't really celebrate, we don't necessarily celebrate the 12 days of Christmas like some other people do. There's been quite the celebration. They do you hear about the 12 days of Christmas, the gifts of the 12 days of Christmas, and those kinds of things. And then we come to Epiphany, we celebrate the baptism of Christ, the Epiphany, the coming of Christ and the coming of the Magi and those kinds of things. That's part of that tradition. Getting into Epiphany. Then we celebrate the baptism of Jesus, and we just celebrated today the transfiguration of Jesus. That comes up there. White is generally the color from Lent. We come through Advent, the color of purple and blue, and then we get to Christmas and Epiphany and the Transfiguration. All those things, those are all white. We're looking at the transforming the white colors and being the traditional color of what's going on there with Lent or with those other colors. And then we're getting into the time of Lent, the season of Lent. We're going to go back from color-wise, we're going to go back to purple. Back to Lent is the color of Lent is purple. Or black. We get to Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday can be black, and then we get to Good Friday. That's black, because we're talking about death. Nobody wants to talk about death, but that's what happens in the church cycle. Ash Wednesday, we talk about the beginning of Lent. On Ash Wednesday, we talk about life coming from death. And we do the sign of the cross on our heads with the ashes, the signaling of being, your life, like you're born from dust, to dust you shall return. Do you know what those ashes, those Lenten, those ashes are made of? Palm fronds, yeah. Usually, if you make your own, you save palms from the year before and you burn them. And then you make your ashes from, the Ash Wednesday ashes are from those palm fronds. I had pastor friends of mine who used to do that. They would save the palms from Palm Sunday, and then all of a sudden they'd burn them, and we got ashes from for Ash Wednesday. You'd ask where they came from. Somebody would say, "Well, I burned them." Wait, you did what? And Ash Wednesday was never. It hasn't been I shouldn't say it hasn't been. It's not as popular a Protestant tradition as much as a Catholic tradition. It comes from the Catholic Church more so than from the Protestant Church. It's only been recent years that it's become a more of a Protestant procedure. I don't know. I didn't do it in most of my early churches because they never thought about it, and then all of a sudden it became an ecumenical thing, and all of a sudden we were doing it more ecumenically than we were just from a Protestant standpoint. I know Skip can probably say the same thing in
Yeah, we'd have Ash Wednesday. I remember my earlier days, there was a lot of Ash Wednesday services, but we didn't do the imposition of the ashes.
Yeah.
Because that was...
that was always a Catholic thing.
It was almost like that, yeah. But then it started becoming more of a thing later on, and with more ecumenical services and stuff, because we'd have a lot of times every Wednesday night in Lent we'd have a special service.
Oh, sure.
And it would
Yep.
start with Ash Wednesday, following some theme, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we did a lot of that in the churches I was in. Of course, my first church was in a very small Presbyterian church in a very small town in Hanover, Illinois, and there were like 4 churches in town. One was Catholic, of course. One was Missouri Synod Lutheran, and one was Presbyterian, and one was Methodist. Presbyterian and Methodist did a lot of stuff together with that. Missouri Synod Lutheran Church wanted nothing to do with any of us. And then the pastor was kind of like that way. He was pretty standoff. I mean, you could talk to him. He's a very nice guy, but wanted nothing to do with ecumenical stuff. And the Catholic priest was Father Cletus Anger. And that was always kind of fun. So I tried to do ecumenical things with Father Anger, and that just, you had to do it his way or there was no way. But we did, we had the Methodist church, and we were right across the parking lot from each other, so we shared a lot of stuff together, and did a lot of stuff together, ecumenically wise. And we did those kinds of things. But yeah, imposition of ashes, I never did that until I think it was in Miller. Finally, we got to Miller, and I started doing ecumenical church, the ecumenical Lenten service. Then we did that. Then we did Lenten worship studies. In the churches that we had, we would get together and do those every Wednesday. In Lent, we would do an ecumenical service of some kind, or ecumenical teaching service of some kind. In the Miller Church, we did a round robin put stuff together. And so, you know, each of the pastors had a particular lesson that they taught. But so we didn't have the congregation moving around. We moved around. So there was like 7 or 8 churches in the in the thing, and so we were at a different church every Lenten service. So it was interesting. I got to meet a lot of other people, go to a lot of other churches, and so that was kind of fun. Same thing happened in Jackson. We kind of moved to the pastors moved around as opposed to the church, opposed to the congregation. So, but yeah, so we did some Lenten studies there and did those kinds of things. So we were doing the Lenten stuff. So that was interesting. Let's see here. So Lent. Coming into Lent, so it was. We do baptism, the Ash Wednesday service, and then we do Palm Sunday. Then we get into Palm Sunday with the palm fronds and those kinds of things, and into Holy Week. Holy Week dates from the late fourth century. It's kind of a concentration upon the Passion of Christ. We get into Holy Week, we get into Palm Sunday, where we celebrate the parade. When people call it the parade, we celebrate the Christ's entry into Jerusalem, and seeing all the pomp and circumstance that follows that, and surrounds the Palm Sunday event. Coming in, and people there's quite a tradition there of Palm Sunday. Of going through that, and then we get from Palm Sunday we go to Maundy Thursday. We go to the celebration of the Passover feast with Christ and His disciples, and that's where we get the Lord's Supper from that particular tradition of where we come to.
Was Monday, Thursday a part of your experience as a pastor as well? That's something that I'd never heard of as a lifelong Presbyterian until we came to First Press.
Of the Maundy Thursday celebration, yeah, it was always that way with we would celebrate when I would celebrate from the very beginning of Maundy Thursday. I tried to help put together the Passover, and we would sometimes celebrate the Passover on and go through the whole of the Passover. Which is a whole interesting thing in itself. The Passover service, of going through and teaching Hebrew and all that kind of good stuff. So it was always kind of fun of doing that celebration. Yeah, it was something that in my experience, I've celebrated Maundy Thursday, like I say, my whole Presbyterian life. We used to celebrate that. We would go to the Thursday night service and celebrate Holy Communion in the sanctuary. And like I say, I tried to celebrate the Passover with different congregations and doing like I say, teaching the Passover, teaching the whole of the Passover history. Learning about the angel of death passing over, and why we did some of these things, and teaching the Hebrew, having the young children do this stuff, and having the traditional meal. I thought that was kind of fun. We did a tradition. We did a meal. We sat down and had the meal, had a Passover meal. So it was interesting.
And what was in the Passover?
And we just had a potluck. It wasn't really you would just do certain a Seder meal where you just do. It's just a simple meal. Most of the time we did. A couple of times we did it with just a simple meal of bread and cheese. Unleavened bread was always kind of fun. I had the kids from the congregation would help me make that. So we did unleavened bread and just did bread and cheese and fruit. So it was a very simple meal. It was the meal that was on the Seder meal was basically something that was kind of a hurried up meal. That was why they had unleavened bread, because you couldn't take the time for the bread to leaven and rise and all that kind of stuff. So you had unleavened bread. and did cheese, like I say, cheese and fruit. So it's nothing very elaborate at all, just a simple meal. And then you would learn the Hebrew phrases and the songs, and it was interesting. Did you ever do a Seder, Skip?
Yeah, I did some services that were based around the contemporary understanding of what the Seder service was.
Yeah.
But what you're explaining would be probably just about closer than because someone with the bitter herbs and having this and having that,
Yeah.
that's all post the temple being destroyed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
before the temple, when Jesus was doing it, it was basically the lamb and the bread and maybe some cheese to go with it, or some fruit, and that'd have been about it.
Yeah, we never serve lamb.
No, yeah, and to have a lamb, and
Yeah.
one of the pieces of material I had said you could have a lamb bone, the shank bone there,
Yeah.
to symbolize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, because we never did anything with the lamb, yeah.
No. Yeah. Lamb's an acquired taste. I don't know. I'm not acquired to it.
Well, I think the word Monday is interesting too. How many people actually know what that means? I was glad that you'd printed here the derivation of the word from the Latin, meaning a command.
Yeah.
Jesus command a new commandment. that
Yeah,
you
his
love
new,
one
yeah, his
another.
new commandment to his disciples was to do this in remembrance of me. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because it's not necessarily Monday, which people say it's just Monday.
Monday.
Yeah, Monday. It's not Monday.
Yeah.
It's not Monday, Thursday, but it's just Monday, Thursday. It's interesting. And then we went from Monday into Good Friday, and we do a Good Friday ecumenical service we do that every year to commemorate, to remember the death of Christ. God, the sanctuary choir is singing the last 7 words of Christ on Good Friday. It's interesting. It's an interesting sort of ecumenical service. I've been involved in those for years again, but my first experience with that was when I was on internship in Rockford, Illinois, to do a Good Friday service, and we celebrated Good Friday. Different churches did different worship services. It's doing this last 7 words of Christ. It was interesting because you come together and do one word. We would do one word, and then the next church would do another word, and another church would do another word, and so the last 7 words of Christ were commemorated throughout the day. It wasn't just a service; it was a whole series of worship services. So it was interesting. That was something I had never experienced before. I mean, I'd never experienced that in my home church. And to do the last 7 words in with everybody. And so we do that, and then when we come, then you do Good Friday, and some people do a good Sunday or a good Saturday. Do the Good Friday, and then you come on Holy Saturday. And they're kind of a somber service. You come and sometimes you would come in darkness and end in darkness. Some churches strip the sanctuary of all the accoutrements that are there. The flowers, the candles, the vestments, and all of those things. They're stripped out of the church on Good Friday, so that we just realize that okay, there's death, there's nothing. We leave the service. I know when we leave the service here on Good Friday, it's kind of a somber ending. You just kind of walk out. We don't strip the sanctuary like they used to, but you can. But you would strip the sanctuary of all the accoutrements, and then you would then you would have the I don't know. Some churches have a holy Saturday service. I don't know whether I've ever been involved in one. Good Friday we stop, and then we come back together again on Easter Sunday morning. And the sanctuary is brightly decorated and it's ready to go with all the kind of flowers and all those kinds of things. With the Easter lilies and all the Easter lilies or mums or whatever the case may be. I know. I think I've told people this before when I was on internship in Rockford. One Easter, the Easter lilies all bloomed early. They bloomed before Easter. And all the greenhouses are realizing, oh no, the flowers are going to bloom too early. We have to do something different. We have to do something, so we have to start a whole bunch of new flowers. And the greenhouse that we used there in Rockford delivered our flowers. And for some reason, I just happened to be at the church on Saturday morning, getting ready for Easter. And I walked in, and here's these Easter lilies sitting in the kind of. I don't know, they were in one of the halls, but anyway, they were sitting there on the table. There were probably 30 or 40 Easter lilies sitting there, and there's not a one that has a bloom on it. They were all just as tight as you could believe, the pods, just as tight as you can believe. And I'm thinking, this is not good. And so I called the greenhouse and said, okay, what do we do? He says, well, I can't tell you, I don't have a clue what to tell you. He says, if you got a warm room, you can put these in. I said, well, yeah, we can probably put them in the secretary's office. It has its own thermostat. He says, well, put them in there, turn the thermostat up a little high, and hopefully overnight, maybe some of them will pop. And I said, all right. So come Sunday morning, no. They were all still really, the pods were all very just as tight as your fist. There was maybe one or just maybe starting to open. So we put them out in the sanctuary, and I made the announcement on Sunday morning. I says, the greenhouse assures me that these will be beautiful by next week. Not today, but by next week they'll be beautiful. And if you want to leave them here, and we'll tend to them over the week, and by Sunday morning next weekend, they should be beautiful. And so they were. But it was kind of a eye-opening for us. But it was interesting. I says, just leave them. Maybe they'll pop open by next Sunday, and it'll be gorgeous, and we'll celebrate the beauty of the Easter lilies next Sunday.
So, Mike, a lot of churches are getting away from the Easter lily now because they're so pungent.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are allergic. They're going to tulips or something different.
Tulips or mums or something like that. Yeah, getting away from the Easter lily. I know it was always that way when they would deliver Easter lilies to the church. We would put them in the sanctuary, and but come Sunday morning, I would come early to the church and make sure everything was ready to go, and you'd open the door, and oh wow, you could tell, the Easter lilies are here. I know Shirley has problems with that. She has a lot of problem with Easter lilies, like you say, and there's a lot of people that are like that. They get that smell, and holy cow, yeah, just drive you nuts.
Same thing can happen with poinsettias.
Yeah, poinsettias, can do the same thing. Yeah, we always say, Shirley would have problems with that, and there was a few other my church members that would have problems with the lilies and whatnot. But what can you say? That's what the people want. That's what people wanted, was the Easter lilies. So. And you can do a lot of way with that, because you can pull the stamen out of it, and then that'll take some of the smell out. But I know. Just as a side, we had Easter lilies in my church in Miller, and they'd be left over. Whatever lilies were left over, I would take home and I would plant around the manse, and. I have pictures of my Easter lilies blooming again in October. And there were several of them that I had that I'd planted outside the house that they would bloom again. They bloomed again in October. I thought that was pretty cool. But anyway, so we get to Easter. Now going away, some of these other days that I have in here, these are days that are celebrated in the liturgical cycle. But we don't necessarily do a whole lot with them. Like Ascension Day, we don't necessarily do a whole lot with Ascension Day, which is 40 days after Easter. But we don't really do a whole lot with it. I have just a quick question for you. Let's see here. Where is it? I thought it was always fun. I know I've got it here. I don't, it's not in your material, but it's in mine. There it is. Does anybody have an idea how the date for Easter is determined? All right. You have an idea? Let's see, what does it say here? I always had a problem trying to remember when Easter was to be set. Easter can potentially be observed anywhere between March 22nd and April 25th. And it's determined, let's see here, where is it? Dating Easter is, okay. Dating Easter is in conjunction with the vernal equinox and the full moon, and had nothing to do with the biblical account of Jesus' resurrection of the Passover. I don't remember. Okay, here we go. Easter is celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. Now, can you figure that out from there? Yeah, Easter is celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. That's the first day of spring. Often results in Easter being before Passover and or displaced far from Passover. Easter can potentially be observed anywhere between March 22nd and April 25th. That was funny because I always had trouble trying to remember that. You know, the first Sunday after the this or that or the other thing, and I always a Lutheran friend of mine in Miller, South Dakota, I kept asking. I always said, Pastor Fred, tell me again when Easter is celebrated, and he would just spout this off, and I thought, okay, I don't remember. I can never remember. I always have to look it up when I'm trying to figure out when it is. So. But it's always hard to figure that out. For me, it is. I don't know. But anyway, so we go through Easter and Holy Week and Easter, and then we get to, like I say, then once Easter is over with, you know, then it comes up with the Ascension, you know, Ascension Day, and then what's it get into? Then we come to Pentecost. The first day of the day of Pentecost brings the Easter season to a climactic end. The world rejoices with unrestrained joy. You know, with the coming of Pentecost, the fire on everybody. You know, the fire on each of the heads of the disciples as they spoke to the crowd that day on Pentecost. You know, and hearing the gospel message in everybody's tongue and all those kinds of things. The red is the traditional color of Pentecost, and usually red. That's the only day we ever see red. Is the day of Pentecost. It's kind of cool. It's the only one that comes up. Pentecost is always a big thing. The Pentecost, the day of Pentecost is not a lot of days people celebrate the bringing of new members into the church, confirmation class, those kinds of things. Those all have, that's usually the day that happens is the day of Pentecost, or within the season of Pentecost anyway. Most of the time that happens. Not always, but sometimes. The new members come into the church then. And like I say, red is the traditional color. Then we go into Trinity Sunday, All Saints Day in November. Then we come right back around to again, the Festival of Christ the King ends the time, marking time after Pentecost. The Sundays after Pentecost are in there in the calendar, and then we come into Christ the King Sunday. And then we come from Christ the King, we get right back into Advent again. It takes the whole of the year right there. Normally as a traditional Protestant church, we celebrate Advent, Christmas, Lent, and Pentecost. Those are the four big things we celebrate in the liturgical year. Anybody got questions, comments? I'm ready. I'm open to try to help you understand. I know it's a lot, trying to figure out what's going on and how things happen.
What about Epiphany?
Epiphany. Well, Epiphany comes in there right after. Here it is, someplace along there. Yeah, Epiphany comes right after Christmas. You know, it's January 6th, somewhere right around Epiphany. That's the day we celebrate the coming of the Magi and the eye-opening experiences of finding Christ. It comes right up in there, it's right before the baptism of Jesus. Epiphany originates in the early Christian church, early Eastern church. The incarnation, God coming to us as Christ, the baptism of Jesus, and then Jesus' first miracle, the changing of water into wine. Right around that time, that's the Epiphany of Christ.
We celebrated today the transfiguration of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I don't think people know.
Oops. Yeah.
The pastors will have a sermon or scripture based on these little holy days, but I don't know that they make everybody aware that this is part of the liturgical calendar.
Probably not. I mean, it depends on how depends on the tradition of the church, how liturgical they want to be. A lot of Protestant churches don't really follow a liturgical practice. They don't follow the lectionary. I mean, we don't. Nathan and Pat don't follow the liturgical calendar. They don't follow the liturgy or the liturgical use of Scripture and that kind of thing. They do their own, which is fine. There's nothing that says they can't do that. And I know the past pastors here, a lot of them have not been liturgical. They don't preach the lectionary. They don't necessarily follow the lectionary, and say I'm a lectionary pastor. I follow the lectionary and preach the lectionary. A lot of them don't, and so when it comes to those little festivals like this, the Transfiguration, okay. I mean, Pat would have done it today with the picture tent. That was part of her thing today was the liturgical readings, or at least the one liturgical reading from Mark. It's about the Transfiguration, but most of the time, we really don't look at some of those festivals and do much with them, which is too bad.
When they started all of this, was that mainly because most of the people didn't read and didn't have calendars, and so this is a way for them
this is kind of the way the church did that. Started out and talked about that. Like I say, the liturgical calendar follows the life and life cycle of Christ. It follows him from his birth to his birth, baptism, teachings, and then his death and resurrection. And that was part of the whole liturgical cycle, and that was where that came from, and that's how that came about. We started following that kind of cycle.
That's very interesting.
I know there's a lot of information in there.
Earlier you mentioned the common time. When does that start and end?
Common time usually follows right after Pentecost. We use Pentecost and Sundays after Pentecost, and then that's kind of what's called common time, and that's because from Pentecost until Christ the King Sunday, right before Lent or right before Advent starts again. Those are all common. That's the common time, and or ordinary time, yeah.
And the liturgical calendar has had, over the years, some changes, and people have played with it in different ways. Back before the National Council of Churches was formed, back in the 1920s, there was a federal council of churches that they tried to get up and running. It didn't last very long and get very far, but they did some things with the liturgical calendar, and when I first started ministry, that was what the Methodist Church had been following, and they were starting to use the ecumenical one. But they had a couple of things, and I followed that the rest of the years of my ministry. Because Mike mentioned, Pentecost is one day, and we have one day of red. And some churches for Reformation Sunday will use red.
Yeah.
And that's only 2 days that you use red. But they had the season of Pentecost that was red, that would run all through the summer. Whenever Pentecost was, through June and July and most of August. And then they had a season of Kingdom Tide.
Yeah.
That would start the last Sunday of August, and then you would switch to green, and you would have that. And a part of me liked that. It was a little longer season to focus on the Holy Spirit. But then you had a specific season that you were talking about Jesus' teachings on the kingdom, which was kind of nice. But that kind of, is completely folded away with the ecumenical movement and what's happened with the 3-year common lectionary that we use now. And there's been other changes over the years, but yeah, I just thought it was kind of interesting to hear that bit of history.
That was one of those, I kind of read through some of that stuff, and I guess I should have maybe brought that up too.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, no? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm still confused about Christ the King Sunday, or this, it says it ends are marking the time after Pentecost. So,
Yeah, here again, the time after Pentecost is common time or ordinary time, and then Christ the King Sunday is saying, okay, look, we're done with all of that. We're getting ready to start Advent again, getting ready to start the whole calendar all over again. And so it just celebrates the end of the Christian year with Christ the King
so the
Sunday.
end of ordinary time, is what you're saying?
Yep. Yep.
It's always the Sunday before the first Sunday of Advent.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Just saying, okay, now the calendar year is all, or the Christian year is all done. Now we're starting all over again. Get started again with Advent.
It's a New Year's Eve.
Yeah, it's a Christian New Year's Eve if you want to go that route. We don't really do. We don't. We talk about it. I mean, Kathy. I think Kathy said something about it this last year in her children's story. She talked about Christ the King Sunday. And then all of a sudden we're done with the Christian year. We're starting all over again.
Any other questions?
All right. Questions, comments? Cool.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad I could help to share.
Skip, did you want to put a plug in?
Okay, next Sunday, we will start our Lenten series, focusing on Amy Jill Levine's book, Entering the Passion of Christ. There's still a few copies in the church office if anybody wants to get one to read. And we'll have videos with Amy Jill talking about the main themes of that Sunday. And so for the next 5 weeks, we will be doing that. The 6th week of Lent, which is Palm Sunday, there'll be something special going on, and you'll be hearing more about that. But we've decided that we would join in. The children are doing something, or the youth rather, and we're going to join them with that, and there'll be information about that coming up. But next week we'll be doing the first session which will start with the parade.